Text by Hinton, Chapter 5, Part 2. Every once in a while, somebody would come along and toss a penny in the fountain. The bottom was covered with pennies. That always made Mason so mad he couldn't see straight. Shoot, if it'd get me a wish, I'd try it myself. Anyway, it wasn't my pennies they were throwing. Try and tell Mason that. Then I felt mean, thinking about Mace like that, and him at the hospital that very minute. I was tired of walking up and down, so I went outside. Across the stretch of parking lot was a big sporting goods store, a movie house, a record shop, and an ice cream parlor. If you didn't know better, you'd think stores multiplied like rabbits. I walked over to the sporting goods store. I meant to look at the guns, but got sidetracked by the fishing stuff. It had been a long time since Mason and me had gone fishing. Maybe if I got us a new lure, he'd want to go again. I like hunting better, myself, but fishing was the only thing Mason really relaxed at. I looked the lures over, trying to remember what ones he already had and trying to find one that didn't cost too much. I couldn't believe the way they had gone up in price. Finally, I decided on one. It would take what was left of my money, but I hadn't planned on buying anything anyway. Mason could pay for lunch. Then I went to look at the shotguns. There was no way I could get one, but I liked looking at them. I found a 20 gauge I really liked. I put the fishing lure in my shirt pocket and picked up the gun to see how it balanced. It seemed a little stock heavy to me, but maybe that was just sour grapes since I couldn't get it. Good sights on it, though. I sighed and put it down. Duck season was coming up. Well, Christmas was coming up too. I walked around a little more looking at tennis stuff and skiing stuff and wondering if there were enough people to buy all the stuff in stores. I guess there are, though, or there wouldn't be so many stores. I looked at the water skis. I went water skiing once, and man, I loved it. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and faced a salesman. "Kid," he said, "can you read the sign?" I looked where he was pointing. "Shoplifters will be prosecuted." "Sure, I can read it." "Do you know what it means?" "Yeah, you catch somebody stealing, you'll do your best to send him to jail." "Good. Now come with me." I did, not even thinking about asking why. When you're in a strange place, you don't think about having control of anything. I followed him into a back office. "I got another one, Ed," he said to a man behind a desk. Ed looked up at me wearily. "What was it?" The salesman reached over and pulled the fishing lure out of my pocket. For a second, I didn't know what was going on. Then I broke out in a cold, sick sweat. They thought I was stealing it. "I was going to pay for it," I said, when I could get my breath. I went from shocked to mad to scared, so quick I couldn't tell which I was feeling. "I was going to pay for it," I repeated, trying to keep my voice level. I sounded guilty. I even felt guilty. I must look guilty, too, I thought frantically. All kinds of visions were going through my mind. What would Mason say? What would Pop think? Jamie, being put in jail. I couldn't go back to jail. They all say that, Ed nodded. Say what? I wondered. Then I remembered saying I was going to pay for it. "I never stole anything in my life," I said. Borrowing that car hadn't really been stealing. Anyway, I was just 12 when that happened. "Now that one I never heard before," Ed said. I was so scared and sick I was close to crying. They never believed me. Nobody ever believed me. Pop would disown me. Pop was funny and talkative and loved to laugh and tell stories, but he had never ever said a word about prison or what it was like. Just drilled it into us to respect the law. That probably impressed us more than if he had given us a day-by-day description of it. Anyway, I knew what it was like, sort of. I remember sitting in that jail cell, listening to somebody beat on the bars down the hall, screaming, "I'm drunk and I'm proud of it," over and over again, and the smell was so bad and the walls got closer and closer, and I knew if I had to stay in there, I'd go nuts like a caged animal and beat my head against the wall, and I was trying to sit real still to keep from doing that when Pop came to get me. From the look on his face, I thought I'd go straight from jail to an orphanage. And when we got outside, he belted me. The only time he ever hit either of us. "I just put it in my pocket for a minute while I look at a gun," I said, as steady as possible. The way they were looking at me made me feel like I was the worst kind of trash. Mason, even if he believed me, he never lived this down. He had such a pride think about never getting into trouble when he had so many chances to. He had turned very sarcastic on Johnny once, when Johnny smuggled a carton of Eskimo pies out of the Safeway store, made him so miserable he couldn't even eat more than one or two. Was he out of the store? Ed asked the salesman, or about to leave the store? It was weird being talked about like you weren't even human. He was inside, the salesman said reluctantly. Turn him loose, this time. He went back to his papers. The salesman opened his mouth to protest and then snapped at me. You heard him. Get out. Everything had happened so fast, I still didn't feel like I could move. I was going to pay for it. I made one more effort to clear myself. I got the money to pay for it. I almost took my billfold out to prove it. Kid, Ed said, people come in here, kids with bigger allowances than my salary, and it's just like mountain climbing to them. They take things because they're there. Sometimes we even find merchandise in the trash bins. Once they get away with it, they're bored with it. He glanced up at me, and for a second I felt like he believed me. Still want the lure? I looked at it laying there on his desk. A fishing lure was going to make me slightly sick for a long time to come. I shook my head. He escorted me out, but he didn't need to worry. I was never going into that store again. I stood outside for a few seconds, still a little dazed. It took me a few seconds to realize somebody was calling my name. Tex? Are you deaf or stoned or what? I turned around. Jamie was standing outside the ice cream parlor with 3 or 4 other girls. Hey, I said. Hi. She was wearing jeans and a shirt I knew belonged to Johnny and that he told her not to touch. It was a little too big for her. I couldn't tell if she was wearing a bra or not. What are you doing here? She asked. The other girls were giggling and whispering together. Nothing. Just killing time while Mason's at the hospital. Just looking at her was making me a little dizzy. The jean sales girl wasn't anything compared to Jamie. I wondered how I could have ever thought any other girl was cute. I must be in love, I thought, and my insides got shaky and my hands started sweating, and there was a buzzing in my ears that made it hard to hear. Doing at the hospital? I realized Jamie had asked a question. Hospital. Mason. Oh yeah, Mace was at the hospital. Huh. Maybe he wouldn't want anybody or everybody to know he was sick or something. Mason was really a fanatic about keeping things private. He went to see your brother Charlie, so Charlie could show him the hospital. Mason's thinking about being a doctor. Then it occurred to me that she might talk to Charlie and find out different. Somehow, when I was around Jamie, I didn't exactly know what I was doing. Going to make money and nurses, huh? Jamie said. I couldn't think of anything to say to that. Well, she said, that's what Charlie says about being a doctor. Cold kill him if he heard. Of course, Charlie's only kidding, partly. Jamie's eyes were bluer than a twilight sky, and her hair had a sheen like a summer horse. And I wanted to squeeze her till she crunched. I wanted to rescue her from something. Spent the night with Laura. She was pointing to one of the other girls. I couldn't tell which one. They all looked alike. We're going to the movies, and Cole's going to pick me up later. I looked up at the marquee. I hear that's a good movie. I felt like everything I was saying was coming out really dumb, but I couldn't seem to stop it. I've seen it before. I like the guy who plays the smuggler. He is a doll. Anger flashed over me like a freak lightning storm. Oh yeah? I hear he's a real wimp. When the covey of girls giggled, I realized how that sounded. It sounded jealous. I might as well have yelled, I love you, over a loudspeaker. That was how it sounded. I felt the red spreading up my neck till my ears got hot. I expected Jamie to be glaring at me, but she just said, whatever you say. Then I noticed she was a little pink too. All I could think of was getting out of there before I said anything dumb again. I gotta go, I said. I did too. It wasn't just an excuse. Mason would be waiting. Well, I'll see you around, she said. Yeah, I turned and hurried off. My heart was thumping in my ears so hard I thought I would be deaf, but I heard, clear as anything, one of those girls say, oh, Jamie, he's cute, and Jamie say, yeah, he's real sweet too. She liked me. I had a chance. I stepped out in front of a green Firebird and nearly got run over. It gave an obscene blast of its horn and an angry squeal of its tires, but I didn't care. I had a chance. Mason was waiting for me at the hospital. He didn't even offer to take the wheel. I was still so wrapped up in Jamie that I'd driven 3 or 4 blocks before I remembered he had his problems too. "Did you find out anything?" I asked finally. He sat slumped in the corner, glowering like a cornered wildcat. I half expected him to shoot off sparks. "Yeah, I found out something. I got a goddamn ulcer. That's what I found out. I got a goddamn ulcer. Anything else you want to know?" That wrenched my mind off Jamie. An ulcer? Is that bad? I mean, serious? Well, it could get serious. It could get pretty goddamn serious. His voice was shaking. I kept quiet and drove as careful as I could. And by the time we got to McDonald's, he straightened up, took a couple of deep breaths, and unclenched his fists. I ordered 2 Big Macs, 2 orders of fries, and a chocolate shake. Mason had a strawberry shake. That was all. "Have some French fries," I said, holding them out. He shook his head. "I'm not supposed to eat stuff that'll bother me. Last time I had French fries, they bothered me." He was quiet a second. "There goes the old chili." I stared at him. "No more chili?" He'd starve. "Hey, man," I said. "I'm sorry." "You and me both." "I gotta get some pills, too. I'm not supposed to let things get to me." His voice broke. It was awful to see Mason upset. He always stayed cool. Now just how the hell do I do that? I figured I was one of those things that got to him. Me and... "You can still play basketball?" I asked anxiously. Yeah, he nodded. "So far. It could be worse." "Have a hamburger. You can have a hamburger, can't you?" "Yeah, but I'm not hungry. I had to drink some barium and it really killed my appetite." Mine was gone too, but I finished my second Big Mac and cleaned up the fries anyway. I don't get to McDonald's very often. "It could be worse," he repeated a couple of times, and by the time we were ready to go, he sort of seemed to believe it. "I hope these damn pain pills work." "You been having pains?" I said, surprised. I never noticed it. "I didn't publish it in the paper, but yeah, I had 'em. Bad, too. I was puking blood after practice last week." I looked at his lean hawk face. There was something about him hurting like that and being too proud to say anything that really made me sad. "You want to go see Lem?" he asked, like he was changing the subject. "Sure," I said. "I'll drive." "Okay," he said. Once we were driving down Peoria. "What happened to you today?" "Nothing much. I looked around the stores." I decided that hearing I'd been accused of shoplifting wouldn't do his stomach any good, so I skipped that. I didn't need to tell him about knocking over a rack of shirts. He'd laugh. So I skipped that. I had some other stuff to talk to him about, so I skipped the part where I saw Jamie. "Nothing, huh? Well, that's a record for you." I felt like I told the biggest lie. I'd gone through 10 times as many emotions in that one day than I usually did in a week at home. I said, "Mace, when you're making out with the girl and everything, how can you tell if it's okay to go further?" Mason looked at me. "I didn't know you'd even got to the kissing stage yet." "Well, I haven't, but just in case." "You know, that's all. If you make a mistake, she'll let you know." He paused. "I hope you're not going out for the school stud." "I was just wondering, that's all. Is it really neat, going all the way?" "Kid, don't get started on that now. Once you get going with girls, you can't quit." "Anyway," he added quietly, "I can't tell you what it's like. I've never done it. I almost drove into the wrong lane. Don't tell anybody," he warned in a voice that promised instant death. "But you and Bobby, you said..." "Hell, Bob hasn't made it any further than I have, but for different reasons. Everybody talks, and if you don't know enough not to believe everything you hear, especially in a locker room, I'm telling you now, I never could stand the thought of getting tied down." He went on. "I never wanted anybody to have any kind of hold on me. Look what happened to Lem. Nobody is ever going to stop me from getting out of here." Well, I knew that, but boy, that was desperate. It was almost scary. "It hasn't been easy, and I don't think I haven't had plenty of chances." "Sure," I said. Lord, I knew he had chances. Being the school hero gave a guy chances. When I get to college and at least have that much, if I can get over the feeling, I won't be trapped. His voice trailed off. We were quiet for a long time. I was so surprised about all this I couldn't even think of what to say. A whole lot of girls liked Mason. He wasn't what anybody would call real handsome, but there was something about him that girls really dug. And he'd been dating since his sophomore year. But probably he'd never been in love. I figured that's make a big difference. If you're thinking about Jamie Collins, you might as well forget it, he said suddenly and hateful, like he was mad he told me so much. What makes you think it's Jamie? You said her name in your sleep the other night, and it was obvious you weren't having a nightmare. I went red, then mad. Well, why not Jamie? It's 'cause the Collins got money and we don't, right? You think money means everything. Nope, kid, he said gently. It's because you're Tex and she's Jamie. Money has nothing to do with it. What the hell did he know? Where did he get off telling me this stuff? Him and his damn honesty. Why do you think you gotta be so damn truthful? Why can't you just tell me a nice lie once in a while? Texas, all my life I wanted somebody who knew more than I did to tell me the truth. I really wanted that. I never got it. I had to learn it all the hard way. I'm just giving you a present I always wanted. Thanks a lot, I said.